discovered that my own husband was planning to leave me for my closest friend. I felt like my entire world had collapsed. But what came after was even worse. Good morning, my dear viewers. My name is Alina. I'm 74 years old. And today, I'm going to share a story that I've kept deep in my heart for a very long time. It's not easy to talk about this, but I feel that perhaps my experience might help someone who's going through difficult times. Before I begin, I'd like to ask you who are watching now to please leave a like on this video and also subscribe to the channel. It helps tremendously, and I'd love if you could tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I adore knowing that my stories reach so many different places. Let me take you back to the year 2010. I was 65 years old, recently retired from my position as a bank manager, a job I held for over 30 years. My husband, Richard, was 68, and we'd been married for 42 years. He owned a successful real estate development company that he'd built from nothing. We had what everyone called the perfect marriage, a beautiful home on Maple Street, enough savings for a comfortable retirement, respect in our community. We never had children of our own, medical reasons, but we poured our love into our nieces and nephews and into our community. I thought I knew everything about the man I'd spent 4 decades with. I thought our life together was solid, unshakable. How wrong I was. My closest friend was a woman named Catherine. We'd known each other since college, nearly 50 years of friendship. She was a divorce attorney, brilliant and confident, someone I trusted with my deepest secrets. Catherine never married. She said she'd seen too many marriages fall apart in her line of work to believe in them anymore. She was always there, at our dinner parties, on our vacations, part of every major moment in our lives. She was like the sister I never had. After I retired, I spent more time at home while Richard continued working. He said he wasn't ready to slow down yet, that the business needed him. I understood, or at least I thought I did. I started noticing small changes. Phone calls he'd take in another room. Late nights at the office becoming more frequent. A new cologne I didn't recognize. When I asked about these things, he always had reasonable explanations. Business deals, difficult clients, a gift from his business partner. Catherine seemed different too. She'd visit when Richard was home, but leave quickly when he wasn't. She stopped sharing details about her life. Our long coffee conversations became shorter, more surface level. I told myself I was being paranoid. We were in our 60s, for heaven's sake. Surely we were past such dramatic complications. Then came the evening that changed everything. Richard said he had a business dinner. Catherine texted that she was working late on a case. I decided to surprise Richard by bringing him dinner at his office, something I used to do years ago. When I arrived at his building, I saw his car in the parking lot, but the office was dark. I was about to leave when I noticed light coming from the conference room on the 2nd floor. I don't know what made me climb those stairs. Intuition, perhaps. Or maybe I'd known deep down for longer than I wanted to admit. Through the conference room window, I saw them. Richard and Catherine, together. Not in a business meeting, way they looked at each other, the way they touched. It was clear this wasn't new. This had been going on for a very long time. I stood frozen in that hallway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. 42 years of marriage, 50 years of friendship, all of it built on lies. I didn't confront them that night. I couldn't. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When Richard came home hours later, I was sitting in the dark living room, still wearing my coat. "Alina, what are you doing sitting in the dark?" he asked, flipping on the light. I looked at him, really looked at him, and wondered how many other nights he'd lied to me. How many years had I been living in an illusion? How long? I asked quietly. His face went pale. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. "Alina, let me explain." "How long?" I repeated, my voice harder now. He sat down heavily in the chair across from me. 7 years, he finally said. 7 years. While I was working hard at the bank, managing our finances, planning our retirement, while I was calling Catherine my best friend, confiding in her about everything. 7 years of betrayal. "I want a divorce," I said. The words came out steadier than I felt. What followed was the most painful period of my life. Richard's attorney, ironically, another lawyer from Catherine's firm, was ruthless. They claimed I had been neglectful, too focused on my career. They painted me as a cold, absent wife who drove Richard into another woman's arms, the house we'd lived in for 30 years. Richard had put it in his company's name years ago for tax purposes, he'd said. I trusted him. Now it meant I had no claim to it. Our savings, most of it was tied up in investments he'd managed. In the settlement, I received far less than what was fair. My lawyer said we could fight it, but it would take years and cost money I didn't have, the community we'd been part of for decades. Suddenly, people were taking sides, and I was shocked by how many chose his. The successful businessman and the respected attorney made a much more appealing narrative than the retired bank manager who let herself go and neglected her marriage. I moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. 1 bedroom, thin walls, a view of a parking lot. Everything I owned fit into a few boxes. At 65 years old, I was starting over with almost nothing. The first few months were the darkest. I'd wake up and forget where I was, reaching for Richard in an empty bed. I'd think of something to tell Catherine before remembering she wasn't my friend anymore. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own life. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't eaten a proper meal in 3 days. The apartment was a mess. I hadn't showered or changed clothes. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, hollow-eyed, defeated, old. That was my rock bottom, but it was also my turning point. I forced myself into the shower. I put on clean clothes. I made a list of things I needed to do to survive, not just physically, but emotionally. I needed a job. Retirement savings weren't enough. I needed friends, real ones. I needed purpose. I started small. I got a part-time job at a local community center, helping seniors with financial literacy. Many of them were widows or divorced, struggling with money management. My banking experience was valuable again. At the community center, I met Martha, a 78-year-old volunteer who ran art classes. She had a spirit that lit up every room she entered. She'd been widowed young and raised 3 children alone while building a career as an artist. "You have that look," she said to me one day after class. "What look?" I asked. "The look of someone who's lost everything but hasn't decided yet whether to give up or get back up." Her directness startled me. "Is it that obvious to someone who's been there?" "Yes," she smiled. "Come have coffee with me. Let's talk." That coffee became a weekly ritual, then twice a week. Martha became not just a friend, but a guide. She'd walked through her own fire and come out the other side, and she showed me it was possible to do the same. "You know what your problem is?" she said to me one day, about 6 months into our friendship. "Just one problem," I laughed bitterly. "Your main one. You're still defining yourself by what you lost, by who you were to Richard, to Catherine, to that community. You haven't figured out who Alina is on her own." Her words hit me like cold water. She was right. For 42 years, I'd been Richard's wife. For 50 years, Catherine's friend. At the bank, I'd been a manager, defined by my position. But who was I now? I decided to find out. I started taking classes, first in watercolor painting, something I'd always wanted to try, but never had time for. Then, in creative writing. I joined a book club. I volunteered at the community center more hours, eventually becoming their financial counseling coordinator. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. Real friends who cared about me, not about my social status or my husband's business. One day, about 2 years after the divorce, I was having lunch at a small cafe when someone approached my table. Alina Thompson. I looked up to see a woman about my age, vaguely familiar. "I'm Patricia. We worked together at the bank, 20 years ago." "Patricia, of course. Please sit down." We talked for 2 hours. She'd also gone through a late-life divorce and had similar experiences with the community turning their backs. She told me about a support group she'd started for women going through major life transitions. "Would you consider speaking to the group?" she asked. "Your story, your experience with financial matters, it could help so many women." I said yes. That speaking engagement led to others. I started teaching workshops on financial independence for women at different community centers around the area. I wrote articles for the local paper about financial literacy for seniors. Slowly, I built a new life, not the one I'd planned, but one that was authentically mine. About 3 years after our divorce, I heard through mutual acquaintances that Richard and Catherine had married. I waited for the pain, the anger. Instead, I felt nothing, maybe a little pity. They'd both proven themselves capable of deep betrayal. What kind of relationship could be built on that foundation? Last year, I published a small book, a guide for women facing late-life divorce. It combined financial advice with emotional support, practical steps with personal stories. It's not a bestseller, but the letters I receive from readers make it more valuable than any amount of money. Just last month, I received an email from Catherine. She said she was sorry, that she thought about me often, she hoped one day I could forgive her. I haven't responded yet. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But here's what I've learned. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the prison of bitterness. I've forgiven them in my heart, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Dear friends, if there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. You are never too old to start over. You are never too late to discover who you really are. Betrayal is devastating. Loss is painful, but they don't have to be the end of your story. They can be the beginning of a new chapter, one where you're the author, not just a character in someone else's narrative. I lost my marriage. I lost my best friend. I lost my home and much of my financial security. But I found something more precious, myself. I found strength I didn't know I had. I found resilience that surprised me. I found a community of people who valued me for who I am, not for what I could give them or whose wife I was. At 74, I'm happier than I was at 64. My life is smaller in some ways. A modest apartment instead of a grand house. A simple routine instead of a busy social calendar. But it's richer in the ways that matter. It's authentic. It's mine. And that makes all the difference. Thank you for listening to my story, dear friends. If you're going through your own storm right now, please know you're stronger than you think. The pain you feel today won't last forever. And on the other side of this darkness, there's a version of you waiting to be discovered. A version that's wiser, stronger, and more authentically you than you've ever been. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Your support means everything. Until we meet again, remember, it's never too late to bloom. Some of the most beautiful gardens grow in the most unexpected places. Be gentle with yourself. You're doing better than you think.